I would like to welcome all of you this evening for joining us to have a moment to meet and discuss issues with our new Provost, who I will introduce in a moment. The format for this evening, we want to make as informal as possible. The suggestion is that we have a group of panelists here who I will also introduce to you and who will be asking the Provost some questions. And we thought we would do that until about 8:30, and then have half an hour. We open it up to you, members of the Trinity family, to ask questions of the Provost or make any comments you like. We can wind it up around 9 o'clock and then go and do what we do best, which is to drink and eat. So, with that, let me perhaps, rather than, I won't introduce the Provost first. I'm going to introduce our panelists in order. I'm going to start with actually David Bronskill at this end. David is a lawyer. In fact, he's been named by Lexpert as one of the leading lawyers under 40. He has been associated with Trinity. Many of you will know him for having been a very energetic head of our alumni, and he now sits on the Board of Trustees and has been a great source of support to Trinity, and thank you for joining us tonight, David. He has his partner, Mark, who is a veterinarian. And for those of you who don't know Mark, you would know that this is a good thing because between them they have 3 dogs and 2 cats. And the Provost, who has a wonderful dog called Archie. I just want you to know about David.
Alfie.
Oh, Alfie. Well, Alfie won't know if I call him Archie. And Alfie, well, anyway, has a potential source of free support in Mark. Beside David is Mairi MacDonald, who also many of you will also know is one of our eminent professors here at Trinity University. She's the director of the undergraduate international relations program. Interestingly enough, her current project is she considers the significance of the international legal framework that allowed participants in the late 19th century scramble for Africa to characterize their imperial ambitions as humanitarian intervention. Does that sound ever so slightly current, maybe? We've had some, so maybe we should be asking her some questions too before we're finished.
Let me finish it first.
Right. At the far end, we have Carolyn Kearns, who was a wonderful chair of the Board of Trustees for many years and who I had an opportunity to serve with. She is a management consultant practicing in the areas of strategy, organization, and governance. She's a graduate of Trinity and has made a tremendous contribution to Trinity over the years in many ways. And beside her is Aditya Rao, who is this year's Mayo Head of Arts, third-year student. I'm not reading these CVs, but I just have to read a bit of Aditya because it shows you what we're doing at Trinity these days. Apart from his working on development projects in India and Ecuador and some other things, it says here, now you're going to have to tell us whether this is true or not. Provost, I want you to verify this. It says here, at Trinity, he has sung tenor for the renowned chapel choir, serves on the executive of the Volunteer Society, stage managed the TCDS production of T.S. Eliot's Murder in Cathedral, organized the annual Saints Charity Ball, works with students across campus as a fellow with Ask Big Questions, a program that brings together students from diverse backgrounds who have meaningful conversations that create community and spark change. And then it says, in his spare time, it says that here. He enjoys participating in a variety of sports, playing piano, exploring Toronto's gastronomic scene, and staying caught up with the latest movies. So, moving right along to our Provost, who has to deal with these students.
I feel inadequate.
Absolutely, we all do. We are very fortunate to have a really worthy successor to great provosts, both Andy and Margie. I just ran into Bob Sharp, who some of you may know. Mr. Justice Sharp was Dean of the Law School. He appointed our Mayo as his professor, and he said that was his last act, to which I said that was his best act. Mayo has an extraordinary background. She has taught high school in British Columbia. She has an impeccable academic background. She has been the dean of the law school for some almost 10 years now, 9 years. And as well as being the dean of the law school and publishing and everything, she has chaired the independent assessment review process oversight committee that assesses the implementation of the Indian Residential Schools Agreement. Carolyn, Mairi, and myself had the privilege of sitting on the committee that recommended her appointment by corporation. And I have to say that that was a unanimous feeling that if we were lucky enough to get her, we would have someone that would lift this college up and even beyond the greatness that it presently have. And so I'm thrilled to be able to introduce her today to you as our new provost, and we look forward for a dialogue with you.
Thank you.
So now we'll move to our panelists, and David, could we start with you?
Sure, I'm happy to start. First of all, thank you for that very generous and largely fictitious introduction. My question is a very simple one, which is now that you're here, I think you've probably started to realize that Trinity is a fill-in-the-blank place. Everyone has a different adjective. I use Trinity is a very special place, and special can have both a positive and a negative connotation. What on earth attracted you to apply to be provost at Trinity College in the first place?
I guess I would say quite simply, one way to capture it would be the people at this table. So, you know, when I was at the law school, where I overlapped with David and got to work with Bill, I was incredibly lucky to really have the privilege of working with some of the most incredibly talented students and faculty. And I really care about academic excellence. And so when I was thinking about what I was going to do next, it's hard to leave a job you love, and I loved the law school. It was really, really important to me to continue working with students and to continue working with excellent students, as I see right here, totally amazing students. And so in academic leadership, which I do, it's often easy to get quite removed from students. You know, in many things you get sort of elevated above what you're really good at. And so I wanted to be able to do something where I could continue to really connect with students, because at the law school, that was one of my great joys. And I thought it would be fantastic to work with undergraduate students, because they're really the heart of a university, and they're, you know, a group I'd never worked with. I taught high school students and graduate and professional students. So I think that's really what motivated me. And I knew a lot about Trinity from the vantage point of the law school, of course, and I see actually quite a few law grads sitting here now, but many wonderful law school graduates, a couple right here, came from Trinity College. So that, I think, also gave me a real sense of what a wonderful, special place it is.
Thank you.
Thank you. What about you, Mairi? Would you?
Well, my question is typically a really long and complicated question, so forgive me. But Trinity is a long and complicated place, and so this is, I think this is proportionate. It's a very multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary place. For one thing, as you know, we offer graduate degrees in divinity, as well as hosting and supporting 3 undergraduate programs, which are themselves interdisciplinary in the Faculty of Arts and Science. So I wonder if you can comment on the challenges and the opportunities that this multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary nature poses for Trinity.
I think it's a fantastic advantage, frankly. That was one of the things that really appealed to me about Trinity. When I was at law, I was responsible for overseeing the creation of many joint degrees, because I think the future of education really is in the connection between disciplines and not so much in a lot of the traditional disciplinary boundaries. Those are getting more and more questioned, and people are bringing things together. So I think Trinity has really been at the cutting edge of that. With its programs, and so that was one of the things that really appealed to me. At the same time, to give students real depth and real competency can be really challenging with interdisciplinary programs, and I think that that's something that higher education is still really struggling with. But I'm very interested in finding ways to ensure that Trinity's programs are really at the cutting edge. I think they have a lot of capacity to address things. You know, people in higher education now are starting to think, well, maybe it's more about competencies, right? Maybe we should be focusing more on the art of persuasion, on critical thinking, on great communication. And I think that programs like we have here are perfectly positioned to do that.
Oh, thank you. Aditya.
I think Mairi put it perfectly in that Trinity is such a busy place with so many different things going on, from curating an undergraduate community and the divinity community, to also looking ahead and asking ourselves, what does Trinity look like 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line? Now, you joined Trinity as Provost on July 1st of this year. What have been your top priorities since taking office?
Really, my top priority, and it's been a lot of fun, has just been to get to know the place better. So I've spent a lot of time before July 1, but after as well, and with some of you, just sitting down with as many people connected with Trinity as I possibly can. Brenda, my wonderful assistant, has been stage managing it for me because it's been very busy, but you know, I ask people, okay, what do you think is wonderful about Trinity? What was great about your experience here? What would you like to see? How would you like to see it evolve? And really getting to know Trinity well is very, very important to me, and it's been a lot of fun. I believe in moving things forward. That's why I love educational leadership, but I think you can't do that without a base of really, really solid understanding. And so it's been really fun getting to know Trinity in all the corners. People tell me about their experiences here and, you know, what was great and what was not so great. I don't get all rosy stories behind my closed doors. So that's been really fantastic.
Thank you. Carolyn, maybe I could ask you.
Thank you. Building on Addie's question, Mayo, looking forward, in 5 years, it'll be the end of your first term, and we'd be interested in knowing, what would success look like to you? What would you like to see in 5 years?
It's a hard question. Trinity already is a wonderful place. But as I said, I see higher education evolving. And I do think that Trinity is, as the law school is, probably one of the few Canadian educational institutions that really is positioned to be among the best in the world. Mm-hmm. And I actually think it's incredibly important that Canada has some of the best educational institutions in the world. I mean, I believe that Canada has a unique perspective on the world that matters a lot, and that we shouldn't send all of our best young minds elsewhere to learn about the world. I think we lose something if we do that. So I guess what I would be really keen to do is to really ensure that Trinity is that place there where, the leaders of tomorrow come to learn.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. David.
Sure. Well, why don't I put on my hat as former chair of the Executive Committee of the Alumni Association of Trinity College, or ATTAC. It's my favorite. It's my favorite acronym. And indeed, our alumni do attack often. I think you will already have noticed that they are enthusiastic, direct, and involved. How would you envision your relationship going forward with Trinity's alumni?
Well, people have been wonderful already to me. So I found Trinity very, very welcoming community. And one of the things that I really enjoyed as dean at the law school was reaching out and connecting with people and getting a sense of the different things that people were doing, different avenues they took with their education. I think there's Trinity has an incredibly rich history. So the alumni base at Trinity, you guys, soon to be, is really fantastic. And so I think one of the things I'm keen to do is to make sure that current students and alumni have really strong bonds. I think that's, there's one thing about me connecting with alumni, but in a way I feel like I would be most successful if I could create greater connections between the students that are now at Trinity and the people who've gone through the doors of Trinity. So that's not, that's more about what I could hope to make happen in a lot of ways. And there are a lot of things that one can do, from developing really great mentorship programs and a whole range of other things that I'm keen to work on.
Thank you. Mairi?
Just to go back to your answer to Carolyn's question a bit, I mean, another way to put where you'd like to see Trinity 5 years from now is really as the destination of choice for the best undergraduates and I guess also best divinity students from Canada, but also around the world. And I'm really wondering how we should start thinking about, and maybe you can give us some leadership on how to start thinking about what it will take to put Trinity in the position of being that destination of choice. How do we get there?
Okay, well, what it takes and how we get there may be two slightly different questions. I think you have to work on a lot of different fronts, and students are very, I think, as I mentioned earlier, the interdisciplinary nature of the programs Trinity has is already a really great natural advantage. And I think if you look around the world, post-secondary education, you see more and more places trying to create programs that are like ones that Trinity already has. But we absolutely can't rest on our laurels in that regard, and I think we should be looking to see how can we try to assess, where things are going in higher education. There's more and more interaction between, the humanities and sciences, and we have new science streams that have started. That's wonderful. And similarly, thinking ethically about things like law and business are also really important. And so I think we have to have great programs. That means looking around and knowing what's going on and seeing, what is most meaningful in post-secondary education. You have to have great financial support for students. I think we would want students to come to Trinity because of their talent, and we should be able to support students no matter what their financial means, and that, unfortunately, I think the way higher education is today, it is going to get more and more expensive. And so being able to support students of talent is really, really important. And I think, wonderful students are looking for leadership opportunities, so how do we create co-curricular and other programs that really inspire them to be able to, go out and change the world. I think when you look at people who come to a place like Trinity, they're ambitious and interesting, and they want to make the world a better place. So students are attracted to the kinds of places that are going to help them do that.
Great.
Good. Aditya?
Provost Moran, you mentioned that you've taught at the high school level and you've taught at the graduate level, but this is really the first time you're going into the undergraduate sphere.
Yeah.
So my question is, what is the single most important piece of advice that you'd give to an undergraduate student at Trinity? So in other words, I'm asking you, how do we all get into law school?
Well, I tell you what I tell law students, that education is an incredible luxury and privilege that you often don't realize until after it's over. And a lot of law students used to say, "Oh, if only I'd known the best years of my life were actually going to be in law school rather than after." So I think people, and you're doing a wonderful job at it. Students should really enjoy it and take up everything. I worry sometimes now, I must say candidly, it's a much more demanding competitive environment than it was when I went to undergrad. I sort of joke and say, I think basically if you were breathing, you could get into university when I went to undergrad. So we weren't stressed about it all that much, and it's different for students now, and it's different for a reason. So I'm keen to try to help support students with that. At the law school, we had doggy days and a whole bunch of other things that to try to help students deal with stress and anxiety. But I also think it's really important to make sure that you really, you enjoy it to the fullest. You do things you love. You don't just do what you think is strategically useful. You do things that you really love, because you will do much better if you do things that you really love. So that would be my
That's
thoughts.
very interesting. That's an interesting curve you described, because most of the people in this room was incredibly difficult to get in, you see, and then it must have gone down when you were
I did.
and it's come back up again.
That's
to,
why
I
I'm
get
here.
A sense of camaraderie.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Well, maybe we won't visit that too much. Carolyn, rescue us quickly.
I don't know that I will, but Mayo, you talked about doing things that you love, and that is advice to undergraduates. And one of the questions that some of us have is, so how do you relax, given your busy schedule, the demands of your job, now that you live on site? It's like a 24/7 job. So what do you do to relax and enjoy yourself?
Lots. So I actually love to work, but I don't only love to work. And I actually, at the law school, I felt it was very important to make it clear that you shouldn't work all the time, and that it's not actually healthy or good to work all the time. I think that's an important message. And I should say, about living in the lodge, I've calculated that I've gained an hour and a half a day. So that actually adds up to quite a bit of time. But I'm learning to fly fish. I'm not very good, but I'm learning to fly fish. I love to travel. I cook a lot. I ski. I have a wonderful dog, Alfie. A 17-year-old son. The students teased me, I guess, at the first high table dinner when I was speaking, because they said, we noticed you mentioned your dog, Alfie, before your son, and you didn't mention your partner at all. Yeah, that's right, exactly. Bearing in mind that none is very obedient, actually. I'm an enthusiastic person, and I love theater and movies, and just do a lot of different things. And I love what I do, so I enjoy it when I work, and I really, really like not working.
Great. David.
Well, let me segue then into a bit of your work outside Trinity, and I hope I have this right, but correct me if I'm wrong, that you chair the Independent Assessment Process Oversight Committee for the Indian Residential Schools Adjudication Secretariat. And so I wonder if you might just very quickly explain what that is, what interested you about that role, what are some of the challenges that have been associated with something that, frankly, is so important and current.
Yeah, so that you do have it right, which
Okay.
is really amazing, not because of you, but because it's such a complex process that people usually think I have something to do with the Truth Commission, which I don't. You probably know that there was a historic settlement of the many, many cases against the federal government, churches, and schools associated with the abuse of Indian children in residential schools. And so part of that settlement created a mechanism for compensating students, former students, that would hopefully be speedier and less traumatic than the normal legal system. And so the process that I oversee is that process of adjudicating all of these claims. I don't adjudicate them myself. There are 100 adjudicators that work in this process. The expectation was that there would be 12,000 to 15,000 claims received. There were 37,000 claims. received. And so the aim of that process is to effect a fair and speedy resolution, but that more or less mimics the kind of awards that they would get in the civil system. So there is credibility testing and other things. And so what I do, I actually have well, Frank Iacobucci said it was going to be a very small job when he convinced me.
They always say that.
I know. 4 days a year. It hasn't turned out to be that, but it is, as you said, David. I mean, I think it's certainly one of the most important settlements in world history. I would say that although it's not perfect, no country has ever attempted as comprehensive a resolution of historic injustice as Canada has with this process. And so what I do in that is to try to keep the process moving. And, you know, the settlement agreement was a very complex one that couldn't resolve every single thing. And so when there are big gaps or uncertainties, I have a committee of stakeholders. So that's the churches, the federal government, survivors and survivors' lawyers, and I try to get them all to agree on a common way to move past obstacles and to move things forward. And it's actually worked very well, I think, because people are motivated by the importance of the goal that we share. But it's a very complex but for that reason also very rewarding project. But a lot more work than Frank told me.
Mairi?
Was Frank also involved in roping you into the review of Ontario's Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, or was that something else? And can you tell us something about that work too, please?
You see, I only take on easy files.
Yeah.
No, but probably the fact that I was working on the residential schools project probably led to this. So that's right. I'm just reaching the end of a year where I have been engaged in a review of Ontario's Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and that's been very, very interesting. It's a very novel piece of legislation, and I've held many consultations online, in person, across Ontario, and now I'm sitting down to write the report with recommendations and just trying to finish that. So, I mean, again, it's really interesting. It's a matter of trying to find what the right point is between, the idealism of wanting to create a perfectly inclusive society and the challenges that are associated with that. So I'm struggling with that right now, trying to capture it all. But again, it's actually been a very moving process because, ability affects us all in such profound ways. And the stories that people have shared with me during the process of those consultations was actually very, very moving and very profound. So doing justice to that is really important.
Aditya, before I turn to you, maybe I just ask a question as a follow-up of those two questions. How important is it, in your view, that academics like yourself be actively involved in community responsibilities such as you've described? And I can see why lawyers maybe would be going to more than others, but to what extent do we foster the idea that our academics that are here get out of the university and actually go and do the type of thing you do? I mean, is this good for the university? Is it good for scholarship?
I think it's really good for everyone. I mean, as academics, there are a couple of us at the table here, it's really good for us to get out, and to see how things work in the world. They often don't work in the world the way you think they might when you're sitting in your office. And we also bring, I think, an important perspective when we've studied things more deeply. So I'm very, very committed to that. And again, I think that that's something that Trinity has a great tradition of, but it's something I would be really, really keen to foster, with wonderful students who I think are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. That is such an important element, I think, of what we should be doing when we're educating.
Thank you. Aditya?
I'm sure you'd agree that at Trinity we have a very intimate community where it's not uncommon to walk past 10 people in a hallway and you know everyone's names and you stop and have a conversation with each one of them. Many students have the opportunity to meet with fellows and professors and alumni, and they often find mentors or role models in these interactions over the course of their undergraduate degree and beyond. So my question is, do you have a role model or a mentor that continues to inspire you today?
I guess I've had many, but my most important one was my mom. By far. She's not alive anymore, but she was really an amazing person, a real trailblazer, and a great student who made a huge difference in the world. And I think I've always felt, wow, if she'd had the opportunities available to me, what would she have done? And so I always feel sort of a great obligation to her. But I've also had many, many people that have supported me because, for example, when I became Dean of Law, I was the first woman Dean of Law. I had incredible supporters like Bill and others who, believed in me and helped coach me and support me. So I think that, having role models and having mentors is incredibly, incredibly important. And when you talk to most people that have had the fortune to do what they want, there have been people that made a huge difference in their lives. So I think that I mentor a lot of people now because I view it, I know that I'm, fortunate enough to be in a great position, partly because people have been so generous to me. And I view that as a real obligation of being in a position like I am now.
Carolyn?
Thanks, Bill. And Mayo, as Bill said in his introductory remarks, I mean, you were at the law school almost 10 years. Yeah. And it would be interesting, I think, for us if you could tell us about one thing that you've accomplished at the Faculty of Law that you're most proud of. If you can limit it to one.
Wow. Well, one of the incredible things about living in the Provost Lodge is I look out my kitchen window at the new law building. So it would the noise would probably bother any other provost, but it makes me so happy. So that would be one thing, because creating a new physical home for the law school was incredibly, incredibly important. And I really felt it was important. I said at one point, buildings can make the spirit suffer or make the spirit soar. And I felt it was really important that students have an opportunity, and Trinity students by and large have this because they have wonderful space, to be learning in a place that makes them feel the loftiness of their ambitions and the importance of what they're doing when they're learning. So that would be, one thing. But I guess the other, probably more intangible thing that really mattered to me, that I felt good about at the law school, was that I felt I strengthened the bonds of community between all of the different members of the law community. And, David and Bill and Mairi would be aware of this. There's the professional, the academic, the students, the administration, the faculty. And I was and the law faculty and the university. And so I was very keen to try to break down some of those bonds and to create a greater sense of community, collective interest. And I feel like I did that, not perfectly, but to some degree. I feel that people felt really good about being part of that, and that, that mattered as much to me in some ways as some of the more tangible things that people would point to.
Thank you.
I think you said you established something like 20 interdisciplinary.
Yeah, 17.
17
Yeah, that's right.
interdisciplinary courses.
Yes,
So
yeah.
that's a bit of silo breaking too.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Interesting. David.
Thank you. I have a bit of a plant question. No, not about plants. It's been planted with me from the faculty
Planted in
divinity.
your heart.
Yes, right. And I suppose a bit odd when the atheists asked the question out of the faculty divinity, sort of like Don Cherry announcing the Nobel Peace Prize. But it's an important question. I'm actually delighted to ask it. The faculty divinity publicly addresses a number of social issues such as income inequality, same-sex marriage, and environmental concerns. And the question is just simply, how do you feel about the faculty divinity doing this?
great. I mean, I am used to being in a place where engagement with the issues of the day, and often really varied views on the issues of the day, is just part of the fabric of our life. And I see David here. I don't know where, there he is. I've had great interactions with members of the Faculty of Divinity, with the incoming students, and really enjoyed them and the diversity of their interests and views. So it's an element of Trinity that I'm really looking forward to getting to know better.
Or Mairi?
Well, you've talked about having an extra hour and a half a day as a consequence of moving into the lodge. You've talked about being perhaps our only possible choice as provost to be able to put up with the construction project across the way. Can you tell us anything else about what it's like to live at work? It's a strange thing that we do to our provosts here.
It is really interesting, and I'll tell you that when it was announced that I was going to be the next provost, I had from my colleagues who knew that, it entailed living basically right across from the law school, there were two very, very different perspectives. So some people were like, that sounds horrible. You'll never be able to get away. And they were kind of horrified. And other people said, it's going to be really cool to live in that Hogwartsy place. And of course, unless I'd felt comfortable, I would not have taken the job. But it's interesting. Like, I have my dog Alfie's out in the backyard, and I hear students from their rooms go, "Hi, Alfie, how are you?" And so I think it's wonderful. I have found people very, very respectful. Although I did mention to Brenda that people, Trinity's so beautiful. Huffington Post keeps saying it's the most beautiful campus, and that's right. But one of the consequences is if my front door is open, people walk right in. I mean, I'm not kidding. I come out and when I'm bringing in groceries, there are like people standing in the front door with their babies getting photographed. It's quite something. But in general, people have been very, I don't feel that there's no division or no separation, and I really enjoy the students. I enjoy seeing them, and I'm looking forward to being able to just walk out and see what they're doing in the quad, which I've done quite a few times. It's really fun.
I think you should tell them what you do when Alfie goes off.
That's
Campus
right.
goes across the road.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, I was at the law school before, so Alfie found a little hole in the backyard. He escaped, and where did he go? To the law school. And then another time he joined a wedding party. They were like, what's this little he's a Dachshund. What's this Dachshund doing in the middle of our wedding party? So he loves it. And it's wonderful. Trinity's very dog friendly, which is fantastic. It's, people bring their dogs to work, and they, it's a very, very nice environment. So it's fantastic. But I blocked that hole in the backyard.
Did you?
I think students are also wondering when Alfie's office hours starts. You can let us know about that.
Yeah.
I think one of the ideas that we've touched on this evening is how vibrant and dynamic the Trinity community is, and you spoke about the opportunities that you've had to build relationships with alumni and with students. And I'm sure you'd agree that strong relationships between students and the admin is paramount to the success of the college. So how do you see yourself, this is something we've discussed briefly, but how do you see yourself building relationships with the student body at Trinity? And I tweeted this at you the day you were announced as provost, but will we see a Trinity manifestation of your Muffin Mondays?
So when I was at law, I had in order actually to build some of the connections that I was talking about between faculty, students, alumni, staff, I started Mayo's Muffin Madness. And we did it, once a month, and then when students had to hand in papers and stuff, we just bring everyone together, serve muffins and juice and coffee, and yes, absolutely, we're looking at doing that sort of thing. And I think a range of other ways to connect with students. I'm keen to connect students with alumni in more informal settings. And so we're actually meeting with the student leaders to start talking about some of that. But I'd like students to have more of an opportunity in informal settings to get together and, hear what grads of Trinity from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, what have they done? What are they working on? What issues engage them? And so there's a whole range of things like that I'm looking forward to doing. But, the students are wonderful at helping with suggestions. And so I'm looking forward also to hearing from you guys about what you want to do.
Our previous provost made a part of his social requirement in the community to make sure that the pub on Bay Street was well attended by the students. Which was, beer and Bowell, if you will recall, was a very popular feature with the students. So, Carolyn.
Thank you. Mayo, you've been very open and forthcoming right from the time we first met you on the selection committee and any other time that you've been speaking with us, and it's been very encouraging to hear so many different things about you and your background and your views. But can you tell us something about yourself that we may not know or that we might find surprising? The fly fishing was pretty good.
I know. I was going to say fly fishing.
That was pretty good.
I know.
You can use that one.
Okay, here's one. When I was in high school, I was not a very attentive student. So I probably wasn't like you. I was kind of like, oh, I can get things done at the last minute. I can, And so I actually had to learn how to kind of work hard, pay attention, be a little more organized than I naturally was. Now, I like to think that made me very good at learning things and doing things very, very quickly. But I certainly was not a model student in high school, unlike many of the people who come to Trinity. So that's a little secret about me that you're not allowed to share.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you didn't tell us when we were doing the hiring committee.
I know.
So far, everything's been consistent with what we heard, but maybe...
Actually, I have a better, now I've just thought of something better, which is that I actually didn't graduate from high school.
Oh.
So here's
False
what
resume.
Yeah, here's what happened. I was my mother, as I said, who was my role model, was very adventuresome, and she felt, I went to high school in Vancouver, that it was a narrow and uninspired education, which by and large it was. So she took my sister and me out of high school in grade 12. We traveled around Europe, and I did a lot of grade 12 by correspondence, which was really interesting because then I actually had to work. Right? It was not like being in a classroom. I actually had to work. And so that was fantastic. But we had to come back because of family illness partway through. And so I'd done half the year of whole year courses and then part of another, a few semestered courses. And I was actually planning on going back and doing another year so I could finish grade 12. And someone said, you shouldn't do that. You should go straight to university and then fix it afterwards. And so I did go straight to university, to college in that case, and then I wrote the grade 12 equivalency exam at the end of my first year, which was really interesting because, the population of people who write those exams is quite different than people who go to university. So that, actually, there is something. I didn't graduate from high school.
And I have a follow-up question on that. Do you still have nightmares about it?
Not after I got through law school.
Well, and that's a very good transition chance now to open up to you, the audience, to ask some questions.
I think that Trinity, again, it sort of relates to the point that I was making earlier about the interdisciplinarity of Trinity, that it is incredibly well positioned to take advantage of the strength of the University of Toronto and of the breadth that we have at the University of Toronto. And I feel fortunate that I'm starting along with a wonderful new president of the university who I think, as a former former dean of the Faculty of Arts and Science, really understands the importance of fantastic undergraduate education. And I've had great conversations with him about the role that a place like Trinity could play in kind of leading the way in something that's been a challenge, I think, frankly, for the University of Toronto. So I'm really looking forward to working on that. I think I mentioned that people have been just incredibly welcoming, and so I felt, as I say, when I talk about the many people that I met with, that includes all of the senior administrative staff, the teaching staff, many of the fellows, and people have been so generous and wonderful and welcoming. So I guess Brenda can figure out how well I'm getting along with people, but no fights so far. No, it's been really great, and people have been very generous, very welcoming in helping me learn about Trinity.
It's $125,000 important.
In law, that's what we call a leading question. Well, as you know, I just attended my first Friends of the Library AGM, and I had fun tweeting Friends of the Library because I went down in one of my tours and got a lovely gift from Friends of the Library. And so I'm in the basement a lot, trying to get my stuff put away. So I've really enjoyed the generosity, good humor, and I also see how hard people are working. So it's obviously a wonderful institution. And I have a 17-year-old son that I've offered to carry boxes when he's back.
Bravo.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. So I've never taught undergrads, but I am teaching next term a course that I'm just coming up with now that's called 10 Cases That Changed the World. And it's about, so what I've tried to do actually with a wonderful research assistant who was in my torts class last year at law and who's a graduate of Trinity. She's been helping me pull together materials, and what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pick the 10 cases that I think have made the biggest impact on not just law, but our collective life, our social life, our economic life, our political life. And so that's not easy to pick those cases, but I'm looking forward to teaching that for the first time next term. I think it's going to be really fun. And then I'm also doing some other things, like I'm supervising students that are engaged in the community research partnerships and some other things as well. So I wouldn't like to give up teaching. It's really fun. And believe me, torts is inherently fun. Yeah, I think that that's really important, and as you probably know, Trinity has two new streams this year of the Margaret Macmillan Trinity 1 program that actually pick up on it and deal with the sciences, and so I think that that's one way that can happen. And today I just met with the new director of the Centre for Ethics, who's really wonderful, and the University of Toronto has a relatively new requirement that all students take some ethics training, and so we're talking about how Trinity and the Centre for Ethics could be part of that. I think that that's incredibly important, and coming from a background like law, the idea of connection between scientific questions and ethical concerns is sort of very real to many debates in law. So I think there are lots of opportunities to do that. And also, the University of Toronto is one of the very few universities in the world, and maybe that shows that this is a mistake, but that has a faculty of arts and sciences. And so I think there is something potentially distinctive about where we are that it encourages bringing together arts and sciences in ways that might illuminate both. So I'm really interested in exploring that further.
And I think Michael, when he was here as interim provost, was
Yeah.
very good at getting
Yes.
that going too,
Yeah,
wasn't
he started the 2 new science streams and a program in science writing, which again I think is very, very important. And so I think there's much more interest these days in kind of bridging that great divide, which is very healthy. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question. I referred to Doggy Days, but that was actually part of a much broader program that I spearheaded with fantastic staff on health and wellness, because when you enter, when you enter the profession of law, you're entering a profession that is going to be stressful for your whole life, and so you need to find healthy ways to cope with that. And so we did a whole lot of work on that, a wide array of different programs and supports. And I think Trinity's incredibly fortunate to have fantastic people. The Dean of Students is already Jonathan Steels, who I'm sure you know, very alive to a lot of these issues, and so are many other people at the college. And so I've already had conversations with people about the fact that, I think this is something that is an increasing area of concern, and concern for good reason. And as you rightly noted, I think there are different issues that are present at Trinity, but they're pressing, equally pressing, and maybe in slightly different ways. I also have a 17-year-old son, so it's not all that remote from me in many ways. But that's something that's a side of sort of the student experience that I think is extremely important. I have some experience on it. I care about it, but I'm going to be also learning from great people here. We've done a lot of work already with the university is again more engaged itself with these issues. And this year, for the first time at Trinity's Frosh Week, there was much more emphasis on some of these issues. So I view that as something that's going to be very, very important going forward. Well, I thought matriculation was very interesting. So far, I thought that was a very, actually really wonderful idea, because to have a tradition like that marks the formal beginning of higher learning, as sort of an important moment when most places just do initiation and Frosh Week activities, I thought was really fabulous. So that was something that I've experienced so far that I thought was really terrific. And in terms of what I will do, I'm still thinking about it and I'm still working on it, but I'm looking forward. It won't be Beer and Beowulf. I'm probably a little more Downton Abbey myself. But we'll have to figure out something, but I'm looking forward to finding a range of things that'll resonate.
Downstairs or upstairs?
Both.
I see. Our province is a broad experience, broad mind and broad experience. I think we've been given an opportunity, you have been given, I think, an opportunity to see a little bit of what we saw when we were sitting on the selection committee that caused us to recommend the provost to you. I think we see someone with great intellect, great professional qualities, but also great human qualities that will be a wonderful fit with this fabulous institution we're lucky enough to be with. So thank you for coming out tonight, and please join us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.